Welcome to another episode of Sacred Reviews. In this episode we will take a look at Whole Tones Games' latest offering, Stray Dogs. A game that is comprised of action RPG elements as well as turn-based RPG elements, but only seems to leave me heavily disappointed because of a variety of issues. In terms of narrative, Stray Dogs starts out with a very basic revenge plot about a street fighter trying to avenge the death of his former master. The type you see in those low-budget martial arts movies that are a dime a dozen, but this game lacks any of the appeal that those movies have since it doesn't have the ability to show us some interesting choreographed fight scenes, nor does it have a lot of cheesy dialogue. But my biggest problem with the narrative is the relative lack of humor in this first part. There just doesn't appear to be that many jokes either, making fun of the plot of the game or of movies that use this plot. And that was something I appreciate with the Baby Jesus Christ RPG. Nor does this game have the surreal sci-fi elements of Divide by Zero. Though before I move on to criticize the gameplay, I should point out that this is the first episode in a series, and as far as I know, the next episode hasn't been released yet, so it's impossible for me to judge the story overall since it isn't finished. But it's the first part as an indicator of what I should expect, but I'm not sure I will play the next part. Gameplay-wise, the game claims to emulate Zelda, but this feels like a lie in my opinion. The game lacks any of the puzzle elements that are associated with Zelda in this first episode, and the gameplay isn't all that similar either since you only have the ability to attack with the Z button. If this game was trying to emulate Zelda, then where's my X button option for kicking an opponent or utilizing an item like a bomb? I realize that the plot is focused on a street thug trying to avenge the death of his former mentor, and I shouldn't expect him to use highly technical items, but what's wrong with giving him throwing knives or something as an alternate attack that uses the bones or something? Another problematic issue in my opinion is that your punch can sometimes hit enemies that are perpendicular or parallel to your character, even though your attack appears to be a simple straight punch. Another issue with the combat is that enemies can sometimes catch you in a damage loop that prevents you from punching back unless you retreat. Maybe I'm alone in this, but I'd like to be able to duke it out with my opponent blow for blow at times. I also can't say I'm particularly fond of the boss fights either. The boss fights suffer from a lack of challenge, as well as clash with the rest of the game since they utilize a turn-based combat system. And I'll be honest in my opinion that the boss fights would work a bit better if instead of being a poor knockoff of Street Fighter, they should be a poor knockoff of the duels in Suikoden. On the mixed side of things, there are a lack of equipable items in the gyms. Though not all games have equipable items, a game that claims to emulate the Zelda franchise should definitely have them in my opinion. Though to be fair, giving a martial artist various types of equipment did seem a bit odd in the Raw and Half RPG I discussed previously on this channel. With that out of the way, I should move on to the gyms, I guess. My biggest issue with the gyms is that the cost of training your character never goes up. Because of this, you can easily boost your stats up well beyond what you need in order to take down the final boss in this episode. Sadly, the only positive that comes to mind for this game in terms of gameplay is that it's easy to pick up and learn, but this simplistic nature is a double-edged sword since the game lacks a strong, interesting, or immersive plot to hold itself together. Graphically speaking, the game does feature some original sprite work and animations. Since I don't have any issues with furries, I have little to complain about when it comes to the basic character designs. On the other hand, I do have an issue with the attacking animation for all of the characters on the world map. The fist is just way too large in comparison to the actual characters, and it's something that can't be overlooked even by someone like me that doesn't tend to care that much about the game's graphics. Sound-wise, the game is sort of just there, I guess. But the only real negative I have to offer is that there isn't any volume control in this game as far as I can tell, which means the soundtrack in this game will drown out anything else you're listening to on your computer, and I tend to prefer playing video games while listening to YouTube videos. As I already stated previously, this game just leaves me disappointed because of how much it fails to live up to my expectations for this indie developer. I realize that this is the first episode in a series, so the game may be able to turn itself around in terms of the story, but the problem is that the gameplay may be much more difficult to fix.
One more thing.
And poison dart frogs don't work that way.